Okay, so today we're tackling a name you've probably heard whispered around in conversations about global finance, about power, BlackRock. But how did this one company get so unbelievably influential? Let's dig in.
Let's just start with a number, $10.6 trillion. That is the value of the assets that this one company manages. It's a number so big, it's honestly kind of hard to even wrap your head around.
So let's try to put that into perspective. $10.6 trillion? That's more than half of the entire US economy's GDP. It's a pile of wealth that just dwarfs most countries on the planet.
And yeah, that staggering scale is exactly why you see questions like this one popping up all over the place. And it's the big question we're really going to unpack today. But to get to the real answer, we have to look past the hype and actually understand the machine itself. So how does this whole machine even work? Well, it all starts with their core business. To really get a handle on BlackRock's influence, you first have to understand the engine that makes it all go, the index fund.
At its most basic, BlackRock is an asset manager. Their job is actually pretty simple. You give them money, usually through your pension fund or your 401k, and their whole job is to make it grow. And their main product is the index fund. Now, instead of trying to be a genius and pick the one winning stock, an index fund just buys a small piece of every major company out there. The source material puts it perfectly. It's like betting on all the horses in a race. You might not hit the jackpot on some long shot, but you're pretty much guaranteed to own a piece of the winner. This whole strategy is called passive investing. They aren't in there day trading, buying and selling like crazy. They just buy a little bit of everything and hold on. The key word here is passive. It sounds totally harmless, right? And it gives them a ton of legal cover. But how passive is it really?
And that question right there brings us to the central contradiction of BlackRock's power. I mean, how can an investor that's supposedly passive have so much active influence? Let's go ahead and break down this myth of passivity.
This is the official line you'll always hear. BlackRock claims it can't just dump a company's stock if it doesn't like what it's doing because it's just to mirror the market index. But that line of thinking overlooks a massive detail about what ownership actually means.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. While BlackRock might only own around, say, 5% of a given company, that doesn't tell you the whole story. See, for most big companies today, ownership is super fragmented. It's spread out across thousands and thousands of tiny shareholders.
So here's the crucial point. When nobody else has more than a tiny fraction of a percent, having a 5% stake suddenly makes you the single largest, most powerful voice in the room. In fact, a lot of academic studies actually use 5% as the threshold for having control.
Now, this power they have in individual companies, it starts to build into something way, way bigger. Because BlackRock owns a piece of every major player, it creates this really strange set of incentives with huge consequences. This is what's known as the universal ownership effect.
Just think about it for a second. BlackRock is a top shareholder in Nike, but it's also a top shareholder in Adidas. It's a top shareholder in all the major US airlines. And yep, it's a top shareholder in all the major banks. These are companies that are supposed to be fierce competitors.
But if their biggest shareholder is the exact same company, what's the real incentive to get into a brutal price war? From BlackRock's point of view, a price war between airlines just tanks the total value of its airline portfolio. This creates what the source calls an anti-competitive logic. It's better for the universal owner if companies keep prices high and boost profits in other ways, like, say, holding down wages.
Now, this kind of incredible economic muscle doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's protected and it's amplified by really deep connections to government, creating a system that seems, perfectly built for them.
The source highlights this kind of insane revolving door. Since 2004, BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials and central bankers. After the 2008 financial crisis, when regulators wanted to label them too big to fail and give them extra oversight, BlackRock lobbied hard and got out of it. Oh, and get this, they are allowed to self-certify their passive status to the government every single year. And this right here is the final piece of the puzzle. It is a completely circular system. Check this out. The biggest shareholder in BlackRock is another asset manager, Vanguard. Okay, and who is the biggest shareholder in Vanguard? You guessed it, BlackRock. They own each other, they own the major companies, they own the major banks. The financial sector, in effect, owns itself.
So what does this all add up to?
A system that owns itself, with less competition and deep political ties. Now, this isn't some secret cabal pulling strings in a dark room, but it is a fundamental shift in our economy. It's leading to what some are now calling a new shareholder oligarchy. All right, let's circle all the way back to our original question. Now that we've looked at the mechanics, we can give a much smarter answer.
Does BlackRock own everything? No. And it's really important to remember, as the source points out, that it's not their money. It's mostly our money, from pensions, from 401ks, from insurance funds. But do they control it? Now that is a very different story. They wield the voting rights attached to all those shares, which gives them immense influence without direct ownership.
And that leaves us with this really powerful final thought from the source material. The old idea of shareholder democracy, where millions of small investors all had a voice, has basically been replaced. We now have a system where a tiny number of massive universal owners hold all the most powerful cards, creating something that looks a lot more like a shareholder oligarchy. A system they didn't invent, but one they have absolutely mastered.